The sky above the ruined city was a canvas of smoke and fire, painted in strokes of crimson and gray. Buildings once proud now stood hollow, their bones twisted by the violence of war. Streets were filled not with life, but with echoes. Shouts of soldiers, the growl of armored engines, and the cruel laughter of mobs who had tasted power in the ashes of conquest. And there, in the heart of that chaos, stood her. The alien girl had been dragged through the streets by chains fastened around her wrists and ankles. Her green-hued skin glistened with cold sweat, smeared with dirt and blood. The mob had stripped her bare, tearing away whatever remnants of clothing or dignity she might have clung to. Now she stood exposed, a trembling figure before a sea of jeering human faces. Rotten food, bottles, stones, anything within reach was hurled at her. Each impact left welts across her body. Each insult was sharper than a blade. "Monster!" one voice shouted. "Whore of the invaders!" another screamed. "She deserves no mercy! Strip her of everything!" The words cut deeper than the trash that struck her. She wanted to close her eyes, to disappear into the shadows, but there was no escape. The mob wanted a spectacle, and she had been chosen as their stage. Among the crowd was Jonson, a soldier draped in the tattered uniform of the Earth Defense Corps. He had seen war in every form, cities burning, comrades dying, enemy blood on his hands. But the sight before him was different. This wasn't battle. This wasn't survival. It was cruelty, naked and pitiless. He watched as the alien girl's knees buckled under the weight of stones. Her lips trembled, but she made no sound, refusing to give her tormentors the satisfaction of a scream. Something inside Jonson shifted. The war had taken everything from him, family, honor, even the feeling that he still belonged to a just cause. But as he looked at her, fragile yet unbroken, he felt something he hadn't in years. Anger, yes, but also a flicker of humanity. The girl stumbled. A piece of sharp metal cut across her shoulder, leaving a trail of blood that ran down her arm. She swayed, and for a moment it seemed she might collapse entirely. The crowd roared louder, drunk on her suffering. Jonson's hand tightened around the strap of his rifle. He should have turned away. He should have let the mob have their vengeance. That was what the commanders wanted. Let the people vent their fury on the prisoners of war. But something inside him rebelled. He remembered the words his mother once told him before the war took her. Strength isn't measured by how hard you strike, but by how fiercely you protect. Without realizing it, he had stepped forward. The mob didn't notice at first. He pushed through their ranks, his tall frame cutting through the sea of bodies until he stood at the edge of the square. The alien girl lifted her head weakly, her emerald eyes locking onto his. There was no plea in them, no begging for rescue, only a deep, exhausted defiance, the look of someone who would rather be broken than kneel. And in that single glance, Jonson understood. He unfastened the heavy coat from his shoulders. It was new, issued to him just weeks ago, though already frayed from battle. To him, the square dissolved into uproar the moment Jonson covered the alien girl with his coat. Shouts echoed off broken walls, curses rising like a tide, ready to drown them both. The mob pressed closer, a sea of fists, torches, and weapons surging with blind rage. Jonson tightened his grip on the girl's arm. "Move!" His tone was sharp, leaving no room for hesitation. She staggered but followed, clutching the coat to her chest as if it were armor. The first stone flew past his head. The second smashed against the ground at their feet. The mob had turned predator, and now they smelled blood. Jonson shoved through bodies, using his broad shoulders to force a path. Hands grabbed at him, nails clawed at his uniform, but he drove forward. Years of battle had honed his instincts. He moved with the precision of a soldier under fire. The girl stumbled again, but he yanked her upright. There was no time for weakness. Gunfire cracked in the distance. Sirens wailed as city patrols scrambled to respond to the chaos. Somewhere nearby, a fuel depot erupted, and a plume of black smoke towered into the night sky. Flames licked at the skyline and painting the ruins in violent orange. The mob howled behind them. They darted into a narrow street where shattered neon signs flickered weakly above boarded shops. Ash floated through the air, carried by the winds of burning buildings. The girl's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She was half running, half dragged. "Where are you taking me?" she managed between breaths, her voice raw. "Out of here," Jonson snapped. "If you want to live, keep moving." They reached an intersection just as armored carriers rumbled in from the far end, headlights stabbing through the smoke. Troops spilled from the vehicles, weapons raised, their orders lost in the roar of engines. Jonson cursed under his breath. There was no way through the main road. He pulled her into the shadows of a collapsed overpass. Concrete beams jutted like broken ribs, offering only the barest cover. From there, he scanned the burning maze ahead. The city had become a battlefield long before this night, but now it was a labyrinth of fire and ruin. Somewhere beyond it lay the abandoned subway tunnels, dark arteries that could hide them, at least for now. But between here and there stretched streets crawling with mobs and soldiers, each one eager to claim their heads. "Why?" the girl whispered, her eyes fixed on him. "Why did you do it? You could have left me." He didn't look at her. Instead, he checked the magazine of his rifle, slid the bolt, and scanned the rooftops for snipers. Because someone had to. Before she could answer, a spotlight swept across the ruins. Voices shouted. Jonson grabbed her hand and sprinted. They ran through alleys thick with smoke, past corpses slumped against walls, their shadows flickering like ghosts in the firelight. Every turn brought fresh danger, shards of glass underfoot, collapsing beams, the roar of collapsing buildings. At one point, the ground shook as another fuel tank exploded, sending a shockwave that threw them against a wall. Jonson shielded her with his body, his back slamming into concrete, but he didn't let go of her hand. "On your feet," he barked, hauling her upright again. Her legs trembled, but she moved. She had no choice. Bullets ricocheted off metal around them. Patrols had spotted movement. A burst of gunfire shredded the brick above Jonson's head. He pulled the girl into a storm drain, water rushing at their ankles as they crouched in this foul-smelling tunnel. The darkness pressed close, broken only by the faint glow of distant flames. The girl shivered, clutching the coat tighter. Her voice was barely audible. "You'll die for this." Jonson met her gaze, eyes cold but steady. "Maybe, but not tonight." They followed the tunnel until it emptied into another street, this one littered with overturned vehicles and broken barricades. Firelight danced across shattered glass, giving the road a molten sheen. A roar echoed behind them. The mob had caught their trail. Dozens poured into the street, wielding makeshift weapons, faces twisted with hate. At the same time, blue-skinned enforcers emerged from the smoke ahead, their glowing eyes scanning the ruins. They were trapped. Jonson raised his rifle, chambered around, and spoke without looking at the girl. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. The mob surged closer. The enforcers leveled their strange weapons. And in that instant, Jonson opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the night, each shot echoing like thunder. The tunnels swallowed them whole. Darkness pressed in on every side, damp walls echoing with the distant drip of water. Their footsteps splashed through shallow pools, their breaths ragged from the sprint through fire and fury. For the first time since the square, there were no mobs, no soldiers, no burning towers, only silence broken by the faint hum of the dying city above. Jonson lowered his rifle and slowed his pace, scanning every shadow with the wariness of a man who had learned to expect ambushes in every dark corner. The alien girl clutched the coat close, her thin frame shivering in the underground chill. Her bare feet left faint trails in the grime, but she did not complain. Not once. At last, after what felt like endless corridors, they reached a wider chamber where the broken support beams jutted like the ribs of some ancient beast. A collapsed ceiling had left an opening above, letting moonlight spill in through twisted steel. Jonson checked the perimeter, then crouched to ignite a small fire with a flare and scraps of wood from the rubble. The pale orange glow flickered, pushing back the shadows. The girl sank to the ground opposite him. She sat cross-legged, wrapping the coat tighter around her shoulders, her emerald eyes locked on the flames as if afraid they might vanish. The silence stretched, heavy with things unsaid. Jonson finally broke it. "You should eat," he muttered, tossing her a ration pack from his satchel. She stared at it, then back at him. Slowly, with hands that trembled more from hesitation than hunger, she tore the package open and took a bite. The taste made her grimace, but she kept chewing, swallowing like someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. "You're not like them," she said at last, her voice low, roughened by exhaustion. Jonson looked up, his jaw tightening. "Don't mistake me for a saint. I've done my share of killing." "I don't mean the war." Her gaze lifted, meeting his steadily across the fire. "Out there, in the square, they wanted me broken. You didn't." Jonson said nothing. He pulled a rag from his kit, wiping soot and blood from his hands. Memories pressed at the edges of his mind, Comrades laughing before missions, mothers clutching children during evacuations, the endless parade of faces lost to war. He shoved them down, as he always did. The girl studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, as if she had decided something, she whispered, "My name is Almera." It was the first time she had offered anything personal. Jonson gave a short nod. Jonson. The fire popped between them. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Almera's shoulders sagged, and words spilled out as a dam had cracked. They took everything. My people, my home, my sky. We were promised peace once. But peace was just another weapon, a lie to make us lower our guard. When the fleets came, there was no warning. Whole cities vanished in fire. I watched my father fall in the streets. My mother, she stayed behind so I could run. And now, her voice broke, eyes glistening, now I am the last of them. Her words hung in the chamber, heavier than Doreen stone. Jonson stared into the flames, listening without interruption. When she finally went silent, he spoke quietly. You're not the last. As long as you're alive, your people aren't gone. Memory keeps them breathing. And memory can be carried. Almera blinked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. Why do you care? You're human. My kind killed yours. Jonson's lips curved into a bitter smile. And mine killed yours. That's what war is. A machine that chews up everyone and spits out corpses. Doesn't matter which flag flies above the ruins, the dead don't salute. For a while, only the crackle of the fire spoke. Almera leaned forward, her voice gentler now. Then why risk yourself for me? Jonson's eyes met her. Jonson doused the fire with a bootful of sand. The chamber plunged back into darkness, broken only by the faint gleam of Almera's eyes. We move at dawn, he said. Almera nodded, her voice steady now. Then I'll follow. For the first time since the nightmare began, Jonson allowed himself a single thought. Perhaps survival was no longer his alone. The tunnels stretched endlessly, twisting through the earth like veins of a dying giant. The silence was no longer comforting. It was suffocating, too still, too expectant. Jonson moved ahead with his rifle angled low, every step deliberate, eyes scanning the gloom for movement. Behind him, Almera followed closely, her bare feet barely making a sound, her hands clutching the coat he had given her as if it were both shield and anchor. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes, time lost all meaning in the dark. Their breaths fogged faintly in the stale air. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily, a metronome counting down to something unseen. And then the silence broke. A metallic echo rippled through the tunnel, a clink like steel brushing stone. Jonson froze instantly, raising one hand to halt Almera. She obeyed, her wide eyes searching the darkness. The sound came again, and again. Footsteps, measured, inhumanly precise. "They've found us," Jonson whispered. Blue-skinned enforcers, not the drunken mobs of the surface, not the ragged militias desperate for revenge, but soldiers bred for one purpose, hunting. Their weapons didn't fire bullets, they hissed with charged energy that melted steel. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like predators marking their prey. Jonson gestured for Almera to keep low. He slung his rifle into position, every muscle in his body coiled tight. From the shadows ahead, figures emerged. Tall, bald silhouettes with luminous eyes scanning the tunnel. The faint hum of their weapons made the air vibrate. They moved in formation, silent as wraiths, their armor catching what little light existed. Jonson's pulse steadied, not quickened. Years of battle had carved his nerves into stone. He studied their movements, counted 3, maybe 4, advancing from the front. No doubt more waited in the dark behind. He leaned close to Almera. "We can't outrun them. We fight." Her eyes widened. "Fight? Against them? We'll be slaughtered!" "Not if we make the shadows work for us," Jonson cut in. His voice was iron. "Do exactly as I say." She swallowed but nodded. He pulled a flare from his pouch, cracked it silently, and tossed it down a side passage. The crimson glow lit the tunnel like a bleeding wound. The hunters shifted instantly, their glowing eyes turning toward the sudden light. They moved with unnerving coordination, 2 breaking off to investigate. Jonson seized the moment. He shoved Almera toward a pile of collapsed rubble. "Hide. Stay silent." Before she could protest, he was gone, melting into the darkness opposite the flare. He crouched low, rifle ready, breath controlled. The first enforcer passed near, his head swiveling unnaturally, scanning. Jonson waited until the alien's back was exposed, then squeezed the trigger. The gunshot thundered in the tunnel. The enforcer dropped instantly, a clean shot through the skull. The others spun, hissing something in their guttural tongue. Blue light flared as they fired, beams carving molten scars into the walls. Jonson ducked, rolled behind a column of concrete, and fired back in controlled bursts. Sparks flew, the confined space magnifying every blast into a deafening roar. Almera pressed herself against the rubble, heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her eyes kept finding Jonson's. They sprinted through the tunnels, past rusted doors and broken tracks, deeper into the underbelly of the city. Their lungs burned, their muscles screamed, but neither slowed. Behind them, the echoes of pursuit grew louder, more hunters pouring into the labyrinth. At last they burst into a cavernous chamber, the remains of an abandoned station. Rusted train cars lay on their sides, windows shattered, graffiti covering the walls. Fires burned into old oil drums where vagrants once lived, though now the place was deserted. Jonson stopped, scanning. He could feel the hunters closing in. This was no longer escape. It was survival bought second by second. Almera staggered beside him, clutching the coat, her face pale but resolute. "They won't stop, will they?" Jonson shook his head grimly. "Not until one of us is dead." She lifted her chin, her voice steadier than he expected. "Then we fight together." For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Jonson's lips. He reloaded his rifle, the metallic click echoing through the hollow station. The hunter's footsteps grew louder, closing in from every side. Shadows lengthened, glowing eyes appearing in the dark. Jonson raised his weapon. Almera tightened her grip on the blood-stained rebar. Back to back, they stood in the ruins, two against an army, and as the hunters descended, the tunnels erupted with fire once more. The abandoned station smelled of ash and iron. The fires they had lit were long dead, but the reek of blood remained, alien and human both. Shattered armor lay in fragments across the floor. The last of the hunters had fallen, their glowing eyes extinguished forever. Jonson leaned against a broken column, his chest heaving, rifle hanging limp at his side. His arms ached, his ears rang from the battle, and his body screamed for rest. Still, he stayed upright, watchful, unwilling to show weakness. Almera stood a few steps away, her hands trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what she had done. The rebar she had wielded still dripped faintly red, though her grip was firm. For the first time, she didn't look like prey. She looked like someone who had survived. Silence stretched between them, heavy with exhaustion. At last, Almera broke it. Her voice was soft, cracked but steady. "You saved me again, even when I was nothing. Why?" Jonson didn't answer immediately. He stared into the dark tunnel, his jaw clenched as if searching for words that had never come easily to him. Finally, he said low and rough, "Because no one should be treated the way they treated you. Not human, not alien, no one." Almera's eyes glistened in the faint glow of the ruined station. She clutched the coat tighter around her shoulders. "You don't even know me, and yet you fight for me." Jonson turned his gaze on her then, hard and unyielding but stripped of its usual armor. "I know enough. I saw what they did. I saw how you endured it. That's all I need to know." Her breath hitched. For so long she had been nothing but an outcast, something to be spat on, beaten, discarded. But in his eyes, battle-weary, scarred, human, she saw something she had never been given before. Not pity, not desire, respect. A tear slipped down her cheek, carving a path through the grime. She stepped closer, her voice a whisper almost lost to the echo of the tunnels. "Jonson, if you had not given me your coat that night, I think I would have let the darkness take me. You gave me back more than warmth. You gave me a reason." He looked at her then, really looked, at the trembling, the blood, the resilience hidden beneath her fragility. And against the walls he had built in his soul, something cracked. "I didn't just give you a coat," he admitted quietly. His voice was raw, stripped bare. "I gave you everything I had left to give." The weight of his words hung in the blood-soaked silence. Almera's lips parted, a tremor running through her. She had no words for the storm rising in her chest, so instead, she acted. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out. Her blood-stained hand brushed his. tentative at first, then curling against his calloused fingers. Jonson didn't pull away. His hand closed around hers, firm, steady, grounding. For a moment, the sky above the ruins burned crimson, lit not by sunset, but by fire and falling wreckage. The city trembled under the weight of collapsing towers. Sirens screamed across the night, alien war machines thundering closer. The hunters had failed, but their masters had come, merciless, vast, and determined to erase every trace of rebellion. Jonson and Almera staggered out of the underground station, smoke swirling around them, bodies and debris littering their path. The stench of fuel and blood clawed at their throats. Every breath was a fight. Behind them, the tunnel still echoed with the cries of the dying. Ahead, the horizon blazed with war. The world had narrowed to this one truth. Survival no longer meant running. Survival meant standing. Almera clutched Jonson's hand tightly, her knuckles white, her eyes fierce despite the fear in them. The coat he had given her was torn and soaked in soot, but she held it as if it were armor forged from something stronger than steel. "They won't stop," she said, her voice ragged. "They'll chase us until nothing is left." Jonson's grip tightened, his gaze locked on the advancing shapes in the distance, towering machines, their lights scanning the ruins like the eyes of predators. His jaw set. "Then we don't run anymore." He led her to the broken shell of a building, its walls half standing, its roof caved in. Inside, remnants of old resistance tech lay scattered, explosive charges, cracked rifles, a console humming faintly with power. Jonson's mind worked fast, training and instinct merging. "We can overload the generator, trigger a chain reaction. It'll take them all with it." Almera's heart hammered. "But that would take us too." He looked at her, eyes steady, calm in the face of death. "If it saves you, then it's worth it." Her chest ached at his words. For so long she'd been discarded, unwanted, treated as less than nothing. Now here was a man who would give his last breath for her. But she shook her head, tears burning hot. If you die, then everything you gave me dies with you. I won't let you carry this alone." For a moment silence fell between them, the storm of war raging outside. Then Jonson's lips curved into the faintest smile, worn, tired, but true. "You really don't know when to back down, do you?" She managed a weak laugh through the tears. "Not when it comes to you." They set to work together, moving fast, pulling cables, arming charges, rerouting wires with trembling hands. The console sparked violently, warning lights flashing. The air thrummed with energy, the generator's hum growing louder, hungrier, like a beast ready to awaken. Outside, the first of the machines arrived. Steel giants, their cannons glowing, their footsteps shaking the ground. The earth split under the weight of their march. Jonson raised his rifle, firing into the advancing shadows. Each shot cracked through the smoke, sparks bursting from armored hulls. He knew the bullets were nothing against their steel hides, but it was defiance. It was a promise that he would not go quietly. Almera stood beside him, wielding the jagged spear she had claimed in the tunnels. Her body ached, her arms screamed, but she fought like fire itself. With every strike, she shed the last remnants of the girl who had been spat on and shamed. Here she was something more, unbroken, defiant, alive. The machines roared back, their weapons unleashing storms of plasma. The building shook under the assault. Walls crumbled, dust and fire raining down. The console screeched, its lights flaring red. The chain reaction was ready. Jonson slammed the final switch into place. Sparks exploded, power surging like lightning through the ruins. The generator screamed, energy spilling out in violent arcs. He turned to Almera. For a heartbeat, the world around them blurred. The fire, the machines, the ruin, all of it faded. All he saw was her. "This is it," he said softly. Her eyes locked with his, glowing in the red light of destruction. She reached out, cupping his face with trembling, blood-stained hands. "Then let it be ours, until the last breath." He kissed her, fierce, desperate, eternal, as the storm broke around them. The generator detonated with a scream that split the night. Fire ripped through the ruins, swallowing steel and flesh alike. The machines staggered, their towering frames torn apart in the inferno. The city shook as if the earth itself had roared in defiance. And in the heart of the fire, Jonson and Almera stood hand in hand, their silhouettes swallowed by the light. Not broken, not begging, but united. The world may never remember their names. The hunters, the masters, the war. It would all move on. But in that final